has been a reported sighting in the North Wood. Peasants have been disappearing. The smell of blood lingers. Track and bring God's punishment upon whatever beast is disturbing our Lord Emperor's peace. Payment will be sent upon proof of capture. A heart or liver will suffice. There seems to be more of them now. The blood of wars has seeped through the ground, nurturing the evil below. Terrors and nightmares stalk the earth, hungry for human fear, human flesh. And it's raining. I hate rain. You can smell them on the air. Blood. There's always blood. I'm glad it's not mine. Not yet. They are easy to track, at least. Just follow the trail of corpses and be prepared when the track ends. Because it will end in death. What they do with these things is a mystery. They must have a warehouse full of them by now. Imagine the smell. The shadows are deeper now. The darkness has entered the world and it doesn't scrub off easily. I wonder if there will ever be an end to it. War is simple enough to understand. The hunger of men. The hunger of monsters is something else entirely. Speaking of hunger, there is a silver lining. They only want the heart, and werewolf doesn't taste too bad. It's a shame, though, that there always has to be another letter.
I received this book a while back and it really did get me going. Joseph McCullough's latest gift to the world of tabletop gaming is a skirmish-style game set during the Napoleonic era, spiced up with monsters. The game is called the Silver Bayonet. I don't really have time for a new game right now. I'm still busy working on miniatures for Mr. McCullough's last testament, Stargrave. But I just couldn't put this book down. Combining musket-wielding supernatural investigators with every favored monster I can imagine, set against the bleak background of a war-torn, gunpowder-stinking world. I mean, yeah. As so happens, I know a real-life monster hunter. Because this is the backstory of the game, a small force of soldiers and specialists doing their best to suppress the supernatural forces that have risen during these times of strife and war. Thanks to time travel, top secret technology I'm afraid, I went to visit my friend Oskar, the monster hunter, and hung out with him for a day. It was a bit gruesome, as you could see in the introductory filmed material. Embracing the opportunity, I asked Oskar his professional opinion on which one of my paints was the closest match for werewolf blood, but we also talked about monster hunting in general. The Silver Bayonet is in fact a secret award given to those who have faced, survived and disposed of monsters. Oskar is a bit critical here, more in favour of a proper dagger and not a bayonet. His most valued asset when monster hunting, apart from the silver dagger, is preparation. One never knows what lurks in the dark, so prepare for the worst. This made me think of a miniature design I'd seen in the past. Saint Decent's Mage Hunters. Excessively protected, padded, lots of little bags for poisons and antidotes, muskets, of course, even grenades. An idea was growing. Realistically, I won't be playing this game anytime soon, but I could build a little diorama. An homage to the brave monster hunters out there, an homage to their most probable doom. I talked a bit to Saint Decent. I think her sculpts and designs are great. Apparently her mage hunters were the first full unit she ever sculpted, drawing on inspiration from real life, aka history, mixing in fantasy elements. The mage hunter unit is sent out on the battlefield to take down mages, padded and armored to be able to resist fire spells and such. We kind of both agreed on the fact that they most probably are facing an impending doom. So for me, perfect monster hunter miniatures. 2 hunters standing on a cliff of sorts. I saw it run this way. Hold it. Can you smell that? Below them lurks a vast monster that's quite happy over the fact that dinner has just been served. Hunters settled, I still needed to get my hands on a monster. Luckily, I have just the man for these sort of things. I called Leif, my monster pusher. Leif, who runs the lovely miniature and terrain building channel Devs and Dice that you should check out, also has a side business of monster smuggling. All the horror one could wish for, just the one phone call away. The monster Leif delivered came in bits. I guess they smuggle easier that way. Pretty common with larger resin-printed bits is a slight warping that then results in tricky assembly. I mixed a 50-50 mix of green stuff and milliput to fill the larger gaps, doing my best to sculpt in some monster muscle tissue. While doing this, I put some pure milliput in isopropanol alcohol to dissolve. After vigorous stirring, this now floaty milliput is great for filling smaller gaps. With my monster hunters, my now zenithal primed monster hunters, I had a plan. Wet blending. Wet blending gives to my eye a great texture and life to a miniature. But for me, it is kind of difficult to get distinction between parts and to get the details to pop. Thus, I've started to refine my process. Starting out with the first layer of wet blending, essentially trying to mimic the zenithal prime, achieving textures and a sense of light and depth on the miniature. I then delicately blackline or pinline or whatever you want to call it, using a darker color to paint a thin dividing line between the different parts of the miniature. I then glaze black. Paint thin down to obscenity just to enhance depth in the absolute shaded parts. Then I move on to highlights, using not obscenely but relatively thinned down paints, preferably the shades already in my wet palette used during the wet blending. The reason I like Saint Decent sculpts, apart from the unique design and storytelling aspect, is the relative simplicity. a little rare in the now world of STLs. When teaching herself to sculpt, St. Decent's practice was to sculpt Space Marines, appreciating the simple but very recognizable design, and a design that leaves room for the painter. Her recent, now more personal and characteristic sculpts seem to me mindful of these same facts. Not over-detailed, but the details that are there are just in the right spot. If you'd like to check out more of St. Decent's work, there are links down below to her Instagram and Patreon. My monster. It's going to hang off a cliff, remember? So when zenithal priming, I made sure to spray as if the head was facing up. The wings disappear down into the dark abyss. This huge bat will be the dramatic attention-grabbing piece of the diorama, almost skin-colored but with a monstrous twist. Being such a large, homogeneous piece, airbrush was the way to go. Thin layers that one after the other affect each other to create depth and an organic tissue-y feel-ish. The Silver Bayonet can be played with several people, as opponents or collaborators, or be played solo. The rules, a mix of other McCullough games like Frostgrave and Rangers of Shadow Deep, are refined and relatively simple. Each player assembles a monster hunter unit, with a specific nationality as theme: Austria, Britain, France, Prussia, and so on. The unit sets forth with the help of specific scenarios in the book to uncover the secret clue markers set out on the table. For example, looking for a tome of magic. One of 4 clue markers contains the treasure, the other 3 might be monsters lurking. You won't know until you reach the marker. This is a great feature that really can platform fun in-game storytelling. The game can be played as a campaign. Every finished mission or scenario gives experience to bring to the next game. And maybe an arm less due to vicious werewolves. As always, McCullough's games are very encouraging in using any miniatures one wants, and encourages enjoyment, as in alter the rules if they bug you. Ash, over at Guerrilla Miniature Games, has great videos going through the book in detail and battle reports. Check them out for more in-depth game knowledge. After the airbrush, some rugged-looking bone detail and wing skin detail with regular opaque paints. Some transparent paints diluted with contrast medium for more oomph. I finished off the monster with oil paints, mainly using a magenta, an indigo, and a black, creating gradients between the different pink and blue-ish flesh tones, but also acting as a wash, adding some depth. Wherever I'd smudged on too much oil paint, I can carefully clean up with white spirit moist Q-tips. And no, I did not varnish before I put on the oil paint. Building a cliff that would fit this monster requires quite the height. At first I thought I'd use XPS foam as the bulk of it all, but I was concerned that such a light material would result in a lot of toppling over. Why not just use a chunk of wood? Why not use a slightly rugged chunk of wood and actually let that show as a part of the theme, a chopped-down Napoleonic-era signpost turned diorama? After gluing on the pieces of cork bark that will be my cliff surface, I oiled the wooden sides to give it a bit more of a, quote, vintage, unquote, look. Letting that oil dry in for a day or so, I then covered this lovely plinth with masking tape. I used milliput not only to fill gaps in the cork bark, but also to create a slightly varying surface on the top of the hill. Even though I will be covering this with texture pastes, I usually try and add texture to the milliput itself, in case some parts of it will be visible. A toothbrush is something I favor for this, but I couldn't find it. Turns out an airbrush cleaning thingy works quite well too. Oh, and thanks to my neighbor Carl for printing me these test minis that now could act as footprint stamps. There's a lot of texture pastes out there. I decided to index some of mine to be able to reference the size of grit, color, and shine later and in the future. In the end, I used one of my favorites, Summer Ground from Scale Color and Dark Earth from Green Stuff World. I did not want this scenery to be forefront, rather something muted that leaves attention to the miniatures. Also, this world is rather grim and muted. Using very thinned down paints, I blend in color shifts on top of the zenithal prime, thin enough to let the zenithal prime shine through. I then dry brush on a white, thin white, mind you, and work up that lovely stone-like texture of the cork bark. The soil on top got a bit more tender airbrush care. Soil is just never the one brown. Gluing on the monster resulted in some gaps in the hillside, more corkbark and milliput work that then had to be painted in a similar fashion as the rest of the hill. I still think doing it this way was more effective than trying to paint the entire hill with the monster on there from the start. My scheme for the monster hunters was relatively neutral. Oskar was firm on the fact that you better not wear any strong colours, who knows what that can attract. But I sneaked in some blues and greens anyway, colour boosts that might in the end be fatal to my hunters, but at least they'll pop a bit more on the diorama before that. And slowly but surely, this was all coming together. I remember saying in a video previously that I really need to try and be a little less complicated, with less ambitious projects. Yeah, as in maybe just painting the one mini. Yeah. Inspiration seems to be constantly taking the upper hand, and in the end I think that is what this video and short film is about. A rulebook triggered all these ideas and inspiration, and for me following that inspiration is important. I should be painting my Stargrave crew, work on that new Stormcast army, build MDF buildings, maybe make that video on tabletop standard white armor. But here I am, time-traveling and building a monster hunter diorama, and I'm having a blast. And you know, having fun is one of the reasons to have a hobby, right? I really enjoy how this thing turned out. The little story of not knowing what lies ahead, of horrors waiting in the abyss, of the probable abrupt end to these valiant monster hunters on this wet and rainy day in 1805. Ponder, just for the sake of argument, that I did not travel in time. That there is not a centuries-old secret of monsters stalking the earth during the Napoleonic Wars, and that the introductory short film was actually shot during a rainy evening in a Stockholm suburb. If that would be the case, then a lot of thanks are in order. First and foremost, thanks Oskar for creating and being Oskar the Monster Hunter. Oskar is a man of many talents and many a great prop. If you think, wow, a person that actually has a proper Monster Hunter toolbox should be supported, then I can recommend you to buy his book, Dr. Caglistro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Links down below. Thank you to my friend Jenny, who not only is a bringer of smoke and presser of the flash and thunder lightning simulation button lots of times, but also got her arm bitten off by a werewolf creature, to then play the werewolf creature and get shot. Quite the conundrum. But I can assure you, her arm has grown out since, and that really wasn't her heart. Thank you to my son, who quite over-enthusiastically made both monster and victim sound effects. Another conundrum. Thank you, Guy, from Midwinter Minis, for In the Shadows of a Great Scrap Orc Gargant narrating so grimly.
No problem at all, Alex. You're welcome.
A humble thank you to my patrons for supporting with on-set pizza and smoke effects. For all you non-patrons, well, consider becoming one. I like pizza. And again, thank you, Saint Decent, for the lovely minis and for taking the time to chat. Thanks Leif over at Devs and Dice for the 3D printing, and Joseph McCullough for the inspiration. Again, all links down below. Now I'm going to go try and just paint the one mini after I've had a bit of a lie down. Bye.